We put the spotlight on Narendra Modi's first 100 days in office, and we thought we'd pick a topic that's close to just about all of us. What better than the battle against inflation? And the question we're asking tonight, of course, is whether or not the government has won it, or how close is it to reining in prices?
That's so true, because what we're given to understand is by experts across the board who we've been speaking to that the volatile and stubbornly high prices could actually be the only big red on Mr. Modi's report card so far. Simran Gill gets us this entire report first.
Taming runaway inflation was one of the biggest poll planks of the Narendra Modi-led NDA. And 100 days in office, Modi knows it's easier said than done. Food inflation is still close to double digits, and an uncertain monsoon has dampened prospects of a quick turnaround. And the need for dealing with supply-side issues is as compelling. Thankfully, Modi has a friend in RBI Governor Raghuram Rajan, who has declared a war on inflation.
Anytime we saw inflation coming down, immediately there's a huge amount of pressure to make monetary policy more accommodative, and we didn't take actions on the other side, on the real side. And again, inflation started coming up. And so I've said, let's fight this fight once, finish it, and then move on.
Arguably, the government has been swift to respond to price shocks. Hardly a month after taking charge, it ordered a crackdown on onion hoarders and also moved to discourage onion and potato exports by imposing minimum export prices on these commodities. Subsequently, more food grains were released into the market, followed by efforts to work better with states to counter food supply shocks.
The only joker in the pack has been food inflation. But the benefit that will come now is much lower fuel. If oil price remains where it is, and if as expected the food inflation comes down, then fiscal deficit will also come down.
Even so, many believe the moves taken by the government so far are quite short-term in nature. What the country needs at this point in time, they say, is long-term structural reform to boost food production and improve supply chains.
Because of a subnormal monsoon, almost a drought year, that's something which would affect growth from the farm sector and would have an impact on, as some of that impact is already visible on inflation.
Many also believe that faulty domestic policies and various global factors have resulted in inflation becoming chronic in the economy. Indian politicians know the vagaries of prices and its impact on the fortunes of governments. For Modi and his trusted Lieutenant Arun Jaitley, the battle against inflation may have just begun. Simran Gill, ET Now, Mumbai.
Let's take that discussion forward and get you a very important voice here. Dr. Arvind Virmani, former Chief Economic Advisor in the Ministry of Finance, joins us live right here on Business Tonight. Thanks very much for being with us, Dr. Virmani. We're discussing and debating the battle against inflation as the first thing on his report card. How far is the government from winning that battle against high prices, you think?
Well, there's two sides to inflation. One is the demand side and the other is the supply side. Now, as far as demand side is concerned, the short-term management the government has done, but it's really, as we know, it's the RBI's primary responsibility is inflation, and really they are focusing on inflationary expectations. I mean, we can discuss their strategy, but they have a timeline. Inflation is on track so far on that timeline, so it's not really only a question of the central government. On the other side is the supply management. I think certainly it was a good decision to use those excessive stocks way, I think double or triple the technical limits for stocks of wheat and rice. So that was a good move. On the other hand, we've not made too much progress, though they reiterated the earlier policy of advise the states to modify the APM, etc., and the movement on GM crops, etc. So the productivity side, obviously, which is more medium long term, remains to be addressed.
Right. Of course, many would say that some small steps have been taken, but to your mind, what else can be done to address the supply side constraints?
Well, we all know that this period of the last 7 to 9 years has been one of the highest continuous periods of agricultural inflation, which is driving overall inflation. Now, unfortunately, the agriculture is really a state subject. So the question is partly a political one, which is of persuading states to take certain actions. But there are certain things so most of the productivity improvement has to be in the states. So the states have to be on board. So it's not a immediate sort of thing. I mean, there's nothing expected to happen on the productivity front in 3 months. But one would hope that over the next 6 to 9 months, the government would be able to reach the states and do something about it. One thing which is under the control of the central government is the import-export policy. And again, there, I think it requires some clearer thinking. I don't think they've done that yet.
What about fears around, the low monsoon? Are those concerns, you think, have they sort of receded as far as stoking inflationary pressures go?
Well, there were two fears. One, if you recall, there was turmoil in the Middle East, in West Asia. So there were fears connected with oil. And the second one, of course, was the fears on monsoon. I think the fears on the first have receded considerably. The fears on the monsoon fluctuate. I mean, I recall till last week, there was no monsoon. The monsoon had stopped in our area where I am right now, but it's resumed. So I think that uncertainty on the monsoon front will remain. But given that agriculture is now, 18% or less of the GDP, my concern is really only a regional one, where certain vegetables or certain crops are very region specific, and if there's a bad monsoon there, we could have some spikes in specific commodities. That is really the fear, and those will have to be managed.
Dr. Virmani, you and I are in the same part of the world where the monsoon seems to have resumed, at least here in Delhi. But a very quick question on Governor Rajan then. Prices on a downward trajectory, like everybody's been saying, is it time for him to begin cutting rates? Because the finance minister asked for it rather openly in his press conference the other day, didn't he?
Well, the government and RBI, I think it was a bad period when they were openly discussing these issues. These are not issues to be discussed openly because they affect the confidence. They give mixed signals. So clearly, actually, that's a very good thing that we don't read about these issues about government having one view or the RBI having another view. Personally, I have had a view which is different from the RBI and the RBI governor. But again, I expressed that in the meetings of the committee. I have, in fact, written many times that what we need is what I call a macro pivot, which is to tighten the fiscal policy and to loosen the monetary policy. Now, and they both have to go together. Now, so we have to see this movement to 4.1% and the 3% which the government has outlined. If once we are confident of that, I would certainly strongly support a loosening of the monetary policy.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.